In our comfortable Chicago suburb, I was the dependable friend, the loving husband, the man who had everything under control. I never imagined that one stray word could shake the foundations of that life. But one crisp autumn evening, in the glow of our kitchen light, a single slip of my wife's tongue did exactly that. It happened on a Tuesday night in October. The day had been unremarkable. I balanced spreadsheets at the office, and she returned from her marketing job a bit later than usual, blaming traffic on Lakeshore Drive. By the time we sat down for a late dinner together, the chill of fall had settled in, and I was eager to enjoy a warm meal and my wife Emily's company. We had roasted chicken and vegetables, and a bottle of Pinot open on the counter. It felt cozy, normal, almost perfect. After dinner, I cleared the plates while Emily stepped away to take a brief phone call. I wasn't sure who had called. She said it was a work thing. I caught a glimpse of her furrowed brow and hushed tone as she paced in the living room, but I didn't press her. She'd been a bit on edge lately, but I chalked it up to a busy project at work. We all have our seasons of stress. When she returned to the kitchen, the tension from the call seemed to have melted away, replaced by a soft smile. "Sorry about that," she murmured, wrapping her arms around my waist from behind as I stood at the sink. Her chin rested on my shoulder. "Just an annoying client." I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. "No worries," I replied, leaning back into her embrace. The scent of her jasmine perfume was comforting and familiar. For a moment, we stood there quietly. I could feel her heartbeat against my back, and it almost eased the subtle worry I'd felt earlier hearing her hushed voice. She nuzzled closer. "How about we go relax?" she whispered. There was a gentle, playful tone in her voice that I hadn't heard in weeks. Perhaps she sensed she'd been distant and wanted to make up for it. Whatever the reason, I was happy to oblige. We made our way to the couch. We cuddled up under a knitted throw blanket, the TV playing some forgettable sitcom on low volume as background. Emily curled her legs over my lap. It felt good, normal, loving. I brushed a strand of her chestnut brown hair from her face. She looked a little tired, but her blue eyes were fixed on me with an affection that made my heart warm. Maybe I'd been imagining her distance lately. Maybe things were fine after all. At one point, she looked at me with a sly smile and said, "I miss this, Dave." It had only been a few days since we last spent a quiet night together, but I understood what she meant. She had been preoccupied with her own affairs lately, and this was a long-awaited reunion. "I miss this too," I said, and it was true. I leaned down and kissed her on the forehead, then on the lips. My worries continued to fade away. Maybe everything really was okay. In the soft light of the lamp, we began to sink into that tender, intimate atmosphere that arises between spouses when the rest of life recedes into the background for a moment. When our breathing became heavy, she threw back her head, closed her eyes, and whispered, "Oh, Mark." For a second, I didn't understand. Lost in the fog of the moment, I thought I had misheard. But when she tensed in my arms and pulled away abruptly, the fog cleared. My heart pounded in my chest. "Mark?" We froze, our faces inches apart. I looked into her eyes, hoping that I had misheard, that perhaps she had muttered some sound rather than a name. But the look on her face, her eyes wide, panic draining the color from her cheeks, told me I hadn't imagined it. The warmth between us vanished, replaced by a cold wave of confusion and fear. My voice came out strangled and low. "What did you say?" Emily's mouth opened then shut as if she were trying to catch words spilling out. Her arms loosened from around my neck. I said my love," she stammered unconvincingly, but even as she uttered it, a flush of guilt crept up her neck. No, she hadn't. The name was as clear as day, echoing now in my ears louder than the TV laugh track still droning in the background. Mark. A name that wasn't mine. I gently but firmly lifted her off my lap and sat up straight. My mind was reeling, spinning through possibilities. Mark was not my name. It wasn't even close. There was absolutely no reason, no innocent explanation for her to say that name in that moment. Unless... A sickening feeling churned in my stomach. I stood up, needing space to think and air to breathe. Emily stayed on the couch looking small and startled. She reached out a hand toward me. "David, wait!" I stepped out of reach. The living room suddenly felt too quiet. The comedic chatter on TV incongruous with the drama playing out in our lives. I picked up the remote and turned it off, plunging us into silence except for the hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Emily tried again, her voice trembling. I didn't mean anything by that. It was just nonsense. You know, like how people sometimes mix up words when they're tired. She was babbling. She couldn't even meet my eyes. Tired? I repeated, my tone sharper than I intended. I was aiming for calm, but hurt and anger were bleeding through. You mixed up my name with Mark because you're tired. She winced and stood up slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. It came out wrong. I was thinking of a marketing strategy at work. Mark is short for marketing. Maybe that's why. Don't. I cut her off, raising a hand. Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. I had never spoken to her that harshly before. My chest was tight, breaths shallow as if I'd run a mile. We both know what you said. And it wasn't marketing or any random word. It was a name. A man's name. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came. A tear escaped down her cheek. That sight, her crying, would normally have softened me in an instant, but right now it only twisted the knife in my heart. I felt a confusing mix of rage and heartbreak. I didn't know whether I wanted to yell or to cry myself. I forced myself to take a deep breath, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. My mind raced for any context, any mention of Mark in our lives. We didn't have friends named Mark. To my knowledge, neither of our families had any Mark. The only Mark that rang a bell was someone from her workplace, maybe. Hadn't she once mentioned a Mark from her marketing department? Yes, a faint recollection came to me. Months ago, after a company holiday party, I remembered her introducing me to a colleague named Mark. Tall guy, firm handshake, charming smile. We had exchanged polite small talk about baseball, I think. He was there with his wife, I vaguely recalled. She was a pretty redhead. I couldn't remember her name. Mark had seemed utterly unremarkable at the time, just one of many people I met in passing through Emily's job. We never brought him up again, until now. All these thoughts flashed through my head in the span of a few seconds of agonizing silence. Emily's face had crumpled into a mask of regret and fear. She wiped at her tear with a shaky hand and stepped toward me. David, I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't mean to say that. It just came out wrong. I found myself retreating a step for every step she advanced. My back bumped into the edge of the fireplace mantel. I couldn't remember ever feeling so physically cornered in my own home. Came out wrong? I echoed bitterly. How does that just come out wrong, Em? Whose name is that? I don't know, she almost wailed, her voice cracking. Please, it was just a mistake. You're blowing this out of proportion. Out of proportion? Are you kidding me? I could hear my pulse pounding in my ears. You whispered another man's name while you were kissing me, Em. That's not nothing. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. More tears rolled down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she pleaded. It was just a mistake. Please, just stay, and we'll talk it through. I love you. I looked at her, really looked at her, searching for the woman I married, the woman who would never lie to me. I saw a frightened, upset person in front of me, but I didn't see a blameless one. If this truly was nothing, if it truly was an innocent mistake, why did it feel like my entire world had just tilted off its axis? Why was she crying as if she'd been caught? I can't right now, I said quietly, pain lacing each word. I pulled my arm free and moved toward the front door. She followed, a sob catching in her throat. Where are you going? For a walk, I replied, voice terse. It was all I could do not to shout or break down. I needed to clear my head. I'll be back. David, please, she cried, as I opened the door. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the stifling anxiety inside. I paused at the threshold but didn't turn to look at her. I'll be back, I repeated, and stepped out, closing the door behind me on her faint, choked reply of my name. Outside, the quiet suburban street was dark and empty. The golden glimmer from our living room window spilled out onto the lawn, and I saw her silhouette through the curtain hesitate, then collapse onto the couch, shoulders shaking. I felt a pang in my chest. Half of me wanted to run back in and comfort her, tell her everything would be all right. But the other half felt betrayed and sick to its stomach, and that half was winning. I walked past the hedge and down the block, not really knowing where I was headed in the chilly autumn night. My mind was racing a million miles an hour, replaying that moment over and over, her soft whisper, that wrong name like a dagger. Mark, With every step, confusion warred with denial, denial warred with burgeoning anger. How could this have happened? Emily and I had been married for 5 years. We shared everything, or so I thought. She was the woman I had planned to start a family with in the next few years. The woman who knew my secrets, my dreams, who laughed at my bad jokes and held me when I was down. The idea of her even thinking of another man in that moment was unfathomable. And yet here I was, fathoming it. I passed under the halo of a street lamp, hands shoved in my jacket pockets. The night was dead quiet, just the rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. I stared down at the cracked sidewalk as if it might offer answers. Instead, images from the past weeks flooded my mind uninvited. Little things I had ignored began to add up. She'd been oddly distant lately, guarding her phone, working late more often. And then there was that supposed girls' trip that just didn't add up. Alone, I'd waved each incident off as coincidence or my own overthinking. But now, with Mark's name echoing in my head, those little signs converged into a pattern I couldn't ignore. My stomach clenched. No, don't get carried away, I admonished myself silently. You don't know anything for sure. For all I knew, maybe she had read a book with a character named Mark earlier, or watched a TV show, or 100 silly explanations. But even as I considered those, I knew I was lying to myself. People don't cry like that over a simple missaid word if it truly means nothing. People don't panic unless there's something to hide. I halted by the small park at the end of our street. There was a lone bench under an oak tree, illuminated by another street lamp. I sank onto it and buried my face in my hands. The cool metal of my wedding ring pressed against my forehead. I took a few deep, shuddering breaths, trying to steady the turmoil inside me. I needed to think clearly. If Emily was having an affair, the words tasted bitter even in my thoughts. What was I going to do? How would I handle it? Confronting her in the heat of the moment would likely just lead to more lies or half-truths. I knew her well. If cornered, she might deny until presented with undeniable evidence. And right now, all I had was a name uttered in a passionate moment. It was damning, but it wasn't concrete proof she'd admit to. She was already trying to wriggle out of it with flimsy excuses. If I pushed her now without more facts, she'd just dig in or become more secretive. My teeth clenched. The very fact that I had to think in these terms about my own wife made my chest ache. But the rational part of me was already kicking in, as it often did when I was confronted with a problem. In my job, when numbers didn't add up, I didn't accuse the spreadsheet of lying. I double-checked. I gathered more data. Here, something in my marriage wasn't adding up. I needed more data. Mark, I whispered aloud, testing the name on my tongue. The word seemed to hang in the crisp air, like an accusation. If he was who I thought, that guy from her office, what did I really know about him? Next to nothing besides that fleeting introduction a year ago. Perhaps I should have paid more attention then. Did I miss some spark between them in that moment? I recalled nothing unusual. Emily had been as affectionate and attentive to me as always at that party. Mark was just a co-worker, pleasant enough, with a wife named… What was it? I frowned. It started with R, I think. Rachel? Yes, Rachel. They seemed like a normal couple. I sighed and leaned back on the bench, looking up at the branches above. Through the leaves, a few stars winked in the city-lit sky. I tried to swallow down the lump of fear and disgust rising in my throat. Could my wife and this Mark really be… together? I hated that my mind even formed the question, but I had to face it now. The alternative was ignorance, and I'd just been violently ripped out of ignorance. If it were true, then what? The idea of Emily with someone else ignited a flare of anger so intense, I had to close my eyes for a moment. My hands balled into fists on my knees. I had been faithful, devoted, and I thought she was too. I never so much as looked at another woman in our years together. The thought of betraying her trust was anathema to me, and up until recently, I would have sworn she felt the same. A cold breeze ruffled my hair and I shivered, realizing I'd left without more than a light jacket. I needed to head back, if only because it was late and getting colder by the minute. But my heart pounded at the thought of walking back into that house and facing her right now. I wasn't ready. Not tonight. I took out my phone with numb fingers and checked the time. 10:42 p.m. We'd been on the couch around 9:30 when it happened. It felt like a lifetime ago. My screen lit up with a missed notification. A text from Emily about 15 minutes ago. Please come home, we need to talk. I love you. The words stared back at me, and for a second I felt a sting of tears in my own eyes. I blinked them away. Talk, she said. Maybe she was prepared to come clean. Or maybe she'd doubled down on her denial. I wasn't sure I could handle either scenario calmly right now. I stood up, heart heavy, and started making my way back slowly. As I walked up the street toward our house, I saw that the living room light was still on. Through the window, I could make out Emily's figure pacing. I took a deep breath and went up the front steps. Before I could even reach for my keys, the door swung open. She had been waiting just on the other side. Her eyes were red-rimmed, makeup smudged from tears. She had wrapped herself in my old college sweatshirt, looking small and forlorn. For a moment, seeing her like that tugged at my heart. This was my wife, the woman I loved. All I wanted was to hold her and pretend none of this had happened, but I couldn't. Not now. You came back, she said softly, voice raw from crying. I nodded, stepping inside. The warmth of the house enveloped me, along with the familiar scent of our home, her perfume, the remnants of dinner. It all felt the same as a few hours ago, and yet everything was different. We stood awkwardly in the foyer. She closed the door behind me gently. An extended silence hung between us. Her eyes searched my face anxiously. David, I'm so sorry, she began, reaching out to touch my arm. I didn't mean to upset you. I swear it was nothing. I sidestepped her touch, shrugging off my jacket. I wasn't ready for physical reassurance. I was still too raw. If it was nothing, then why did you react like that? I asked quietly. I was exhausted and hurt, and it came through in my tone. She opened her mouth, but seemed to struggle for an answer. Finally, she whispered, because I saw how much I hurt you, and it scared me. I never want to hurt you, David. It sounded like a practiced line, something intended to evade the true question. It confirmed what I suspected. She wasn't going to tell me the truth tonight. Either she was still clinging to her lie, or she was too cowardly to admit it outright. Either way, this conversation was going nowhere. I swallowed hard and nodded slowly. You did hurt me. My voice nearly cracked, and I took a steadying breath. I just need to know one thing, Em. Why did you say that name? Give me one good reason I should believe this was an innocent mistake. She opened her mouth again, a fresh tear slipping down her face. I can't, she croaked. I don't know why. It just happened. But I love you. Only you. Please believe me. Only you. The words rung hollow. If that were true, we wouldn't be here. I looked at her, trying to see if maybe, just maybe, I was wrong to doubt. Could I be making a monster out of a molehill? But my gut told me otherwise. It felt like she was begging me to accept an obvious lie because she couldn't or wouldn't tell the truth. My silence must have spoken volumes. She wiped her eyes and straightened a little, voice trembling but resolute. I don't want to fight. I know what it sounded like, but you have to trust me. There is no one else. There isn't. She attempted a small, broken smile. You're everything to me. Trust. That word stung the most. The trust I had in her was the very thing that made this so painful. I realized I couldn't stand here and listen to her pleas any longer tonight. My emotions were too raw, and we were going in circles. I sighed, suddenly feeling bone-tired. I think we should get some sleep. My voice was flat. It's late. We're both upset. Talking in circles isn't helping. A look of dismay crossed her face. You want to just go to bed? She seemed caught between relief and apprehension. Probably glad I wasn't pressing further, but also worried about what came next. What else can we do right now? I replied quietly. The question hung, and she didn't answer. She knew as well as I did that I didn't believe her, but I wasn't about to stand here all night wringing a confession from her. If she wasn't ready to tell the truth, I couldn't force it without proof. And if by some miracle she was innocent, then time would show it. Either way, nothing would be solved tonight. She nodded hesitantly. Okay. Without another word, I walked past her and headed upstairs. Each step up the staircase felt heavy, like wading through mud. Behind me, I heard her follow, her footsteps timid. In our bedroom, I grabbed an extra pillow and the spare blanket from our closet. She stood in the doorway, wringing her hands. What are you doing? I'll take the couch tonight, I said, not meeting her gaze. I just need I need to be alone, Em. Her breath hitched, but she didn't object. Maybe she knew I wouldn't budge, or maybe she felt she deserved it. Either way, I brushed by her gently and made my way back downstairs with my makeshift bedding. Before I settled on the couch, I locked the front door, more out of habit than anything. My mind flashed to how I used to feel so safe and happy locking up our home each night, her by my side. Now it felt like I was locking out an intruder, only the intruder might have already been inside. In our bed. I lay down on the couch, the pillow under my head damp with one or two tears I couldn't hold back. Upstairs, I heard the soft creak of our bedroom floorboards. Was she pacing? Crying? It took all my willpower not to run up there and hold her. But that image of her whispering another man's name? It kept me rooted in place, a bitter reminder of why I couldn't just pretend everything was all right. My mind wouldn't shut off. I stared at the dark ceiling, listening to the faint tick of the living room clock. One word. One single word had sent my world careening off course. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty as I closed my eyes, still seeing her guilty face in my mind. Nothing would ever be the same after tonight. Part 2. Turmoil and Resolve. I barely slept that night. Despite the exhaustion weighing on me, my mind refused to shut down. I tossed and turned on the narrow couch, endless what-ifs looping through my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice again in that breathy whisper. Oh, Mark. It was like a broken record, a nightmare on repeat. Sometime around 4 a.m., I drifted into a fitful doze only to jolt awake again before my 6:30 alarm. Dawn's early gray light crept through the blinds as I sat up, my neck sore and head pounding from a lack of real rest. Upstairs, I heard the soft thud of footsteps, Emily moving around. The thought of seeing her right now sent a spike of anxiety through me. What would I even say? Should I act normal? Confront her again? I still had no idea how to proceed. I decided to grab a quick shower in the downstairs bathroom attached to my home office, avoiding the master bath where she'd likely be. The hot water did little to ease the tension coiled in my muscles. As I dressed in yesterday's jeans and a clean shirt from the laundry basket, I hadn't exactly planned ahead for sleeping on the couch. I steeled myself for an awkward morning. Sure enough, when I emerged into the kitchen, hair still damp, I found Emily there. She stood by the coffee maker, 2 mugs set out, just like every other morning of our married life. Only this wasn't any other morning. She turned at the sound of my footsteps. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she offered a tentative smile that didn't reach those eyes. Good morning, she said quietly, voice hoarse. Morning, I replied. I kept my tone neutral, polite, as if she were a coworker I didn't know very well. There was a palpable tension in the air, the unspoken weight of last night pressing on everything. I made coffee, she offered, lifting a pot that had just finished brewing. Thanks. I took the mug she'd prepared for me, noting that she'd poured it black. That in itself was telling. Normally, she'd add a touch of cream and a half teaspoon of sugar for me, the way I like it. Today, it was as if she didn't trust herself to get even that right. Or maybe she thought I wouldn't want her small gestures of care. It was a small detail, but it hurt nonetheless. We sat down at the kitchen island in awkward silence. She fiddled with her mug, not drinking, just tracing the rim with her finger. I took a few sips, letting the bitter heat wake me up a bit more. Finally, she cleared her throat. I meant what I said last night, she murmured. I'm really sorry, David. I stared into my coffee, watching a few grounds spin at the bottom. You already said that, I replied quietly. I wasn't trying to be cruel, but I had no energy for this conversation. Not until I had more clarity. She nodded, tears glossing her eyes anew. I don't want us to be like this. Please tell me how to fix it. Her voice trembled on the last words. That made me look up. A flash of anger sparked inside me. Why was she asking me how to fix something she broke? Did she expect me to just forget it? But I tamped the anger down. Losing my temper wouldn't help. If anything, it would just push her further into defensiveness or fear. I don't know if we can fix anything until I know the truth, I said evenly, meeting her gaze. And I'm not convinced I have that yet. She flinched and looked away, confirming my suspicion that truth was still not on the menu. With a shaky breath, she tried a different tack. Maybe we could talk to someone, like a counselor? If you think I broke your trust, I mean, even if it was unintentional, maybe we need help to get past it. Her words stumbled out in a rush. I almost scoffed. Couples counseling. Was she serious? That suggestion might have been reasonable if this were some minor marital issue, a misunderstanding. But if what I feared was true, a counselor wasn't going to unbreak the vows she might have shattered. Still, the fact she jumped straight to that option rather than simply clearing up what happened told me a lot. She'd rather rope in a therapist than just say, "No, I'm not cheating on you." Because she couldn't say that, could she? I rubbed my temple, feeling the stirrings of a headache. I think it's a bit early for counseling, Em. We haven't even discussed what the real issue is. I paused, then added pointedly, "Or who?" She visibly blanched. Her fingers gripped the coffee mug so tightly I thought it might crack. For a second, I thought she might finally break and tell me everything because her facade was paper thin this morning. But in the end, she just whispered, "I don't know what else to say." A heavy silence followed. I finished my coffee in gulps, eager to have an excuse to leave the table. "I should get to work," I said, rising. It was still early, but I needed to get out of the house. "David," she started, standing as well. There was desperation in her voice that almost softened me. Almost. I held up a hand. "Not now. I can't do this right now, Em. I have to clear my head." I grabbed my laptop bag and keys from the counter. She hovered a few steps away, looking like she wanted to hug me or scream or both. Ultimately, she just nodded. "Okay," she murmured. "Maybe tonight we can talk more?" "Maybe," I said noncommittally. I felt a small pang at the defeated slump of her shoulders, but I reminded myself that I still didn't know her side of the story, or if I even wanted to hear whatever story she'd tell. I turned and headed for the door. As I opened it, she spoke up softly behind me. "I love you, David." I closed my eyes for a beat, hand on the doorknob. For years, those words were my daily fuel, the thing that made any hardship worthwhile. Now I didn't know what to feel. I managed a nod without looking back. "Take care," I muttered, and stepped out. The crisp morning air was a relief as I walked to my car. I realized my hands were trembling slightly, anger or nerves, I wasn't sure. Probably both. I took a minute to breathe deeply before starting the engine. My office was downtown, a 30-minute drive without traffic. I left early enough to beat the rush, which meant I had time to stop by a coffee shop near the office building for a second cup and maybe a bagel. I certainly hadn't been hungry enough to eat at home. Inside the coffee shop, as I waited for my order, I pulled out my phone. Habit made my thumb hover over the messaging app where I usually sent a morning text to Emily, something sweet or funny to wish her a good day. I caught myself with a grimace and shoved the phone back in my pocket. Not today. By the time I got to work, I was running on fumes and caffeine. I tried to focus on the client tax documents I was supposed to review, but the numbers and legalese blurred together on the screen. After rereading the same paragraph 5 times without absorbing a word, I gave up with a sigh. My thoughts drifted inevitably back to the problem at hand. I swiveled my chair to face the window, the Chicago skyline an indifferent sprawl under a pale morning sun. Usually, the bustle of the city energized me. Today, I felt like I was somewhere else entirely, isolated in my own world of hurt. I needed to do something, anything, productive about this situation or I'd go crazy. If Emily wouldn't tell the truth, I had to find it on my own. The analytical part of my brain set to work. Identify Mark, gather information, confirm or refute the affair hypothesis. Mark. That one name had become the axis on which my life's biggest question now turned. If I could find out who he really was to Emily, I'd have my answer. I cracked my knuckles, took a fortifying swig of coffee, and opened up a web browser. First step. Confirm Mark's full identity. I recalled meeting him briefly at that holiday party. Mark? What was his last name? I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing the scene. I had shaken his hand. He'd introduced himself. "Mark Ellison, I work with your wife. Great to meet you." "Yes, Ellison." And his wife was Rachel. I was almost sure that was right. They were around our age, early 30s, well-dressed. I remember Emily complimenting Rachel's necklace that night. I typed Mark Ellison Chicago Marketing into the search bar and hit enter. Sure enough, results popped up about a Mark Ellison at Brightside Advertising, Emily's company. I quickly found his LinkedIn profile confirming he worked at the same firm as Emily. A bit more digging turned up a local magazine blurb from last year mentioning Mark Ellison and his wife Rachel at a charity event. Proof I had the right guy and that he was indeed married. So far, no smoking gun in any of this, but I hadn't expected one. I drummed my fingers on the desk, thinking, should I try to find Rachel's contact info? A part of me hesitated. Dragging another person into this mess felt drastic and cruel, if she didn't already know. But another part of me reasoned that Rachel deserved to know if her husband was betraying her, just as I deserved to know if my wife was betraying me. We were two sides of the same coin, unwitting players in this potential tragedy. Perhaps she had noticed something off with Mark, just as I had with Emily. Perhaps she had suspicions too. The question was, how to approach her. I considered reaching out on social media. Facebook was the obvious choice. I didn't have her as a friend. I barely used my Facebook, truth be told. But I could try to find her profile. I searched her name and city and quickly found what looked like it might be her. A profile for Rachel Cole Ellison. The profile picture showed a group of women at a brunch, one of whom resembled the redhead I remembered. Her privacy settings were fairly strict. I couldn't see much except a few profile pictures and that she was friends with an account that likely belonged to Mark. The photo was him. That confirmed I had the right person. I deliberated on sending her a message. Cold messaging someone about something this sensitive was risky. She might ignore it or think it's a prank. Alternatively, maybe I should call her, but I didn't have her number. Perhaps I could get it. How? Inspiration struck the charity event. It was a small chance, but if I recalled correctly, the event was organized by some local group. If she was on a committee or something, her number or email might be listed on a public flyer or site. It was a long shot, but I had time. I searched for the Children's Hospital fundraiser from that gala blurb. After a few minutes of clicking around, I found a page listing event volunteers, and under Marketing and PR Committee I saw Rachel Ellison, contact rellisonorganization.org, an email address. It wasn't a phone number, but it was something. I sat back and stared at the email address. Now that I had it, the weight of what I was about to do settled on me. Was I really prepared to email this woman and potentially blow up both of our lives? If I was wrong about Emily and Mark, I would be dragging an innocent person into a hurtful misunderstanding. But I wasn't wrong. I felt it deep in my gut. And I needed an ally, or at least someone who could confirm my suspicions from the other side. I decided a phone call would be better than an email. Email was too impersonal, and there was no telling when she might see it. I wanted to talk, human to human, hear her tone and gauge her reaction. The website didn't list a phone number for her directly, but it did have a general contact number for the volunteer office. Perhaps they could connect me if I concocted a plausible reason. It felt a bit underhanded, but I rationalized that desperate times called for desperate measures. I took a deep breath and dialed the number. After a few minutes, I was patched through to her line. After 3 rings, a woman's voice answered, cautious and curious. Hello? She had a pleasant voice, a bit of a southern lilt. I instantly remembered she was originally from Georgia or something, mentioned in passing at the party. Hi, is this Rachel? Rachel Ellison? I asked. Yeah, who's this? Wary now. I took a breath, no backing out. My name is David. You and I met at last year's holiday party for Brightside Advertising. I'm Emily's husband, Emily Saunders. She works with your husband, Mark. There was a brief silence on the other end, but I could hear her breathing. Okay, she said slowly, clearly puzzled why I was calling. And, I realize this is kind of out of the blue, I continued, swallowing. My mouth had gone dry. I actually got your number through the Children's Hospital fundraiser office. I needed to talk to you about something. It's important. I could practically feel her confusion turn into a slight edge of concern. Is everything all right? Why didn't you just ask Mark for my number if you needed to reach me? Her tone was polite but had a hint of suspicion. I ran a hand through my hair, shut my eyes, and decided to be as direct as possible. Rachel, I'm sorry to contact you like this. The truth is, I suspect that my wife and your husband might be involved in an affair. There, I said it. My heart thundered as the words hung in the air. On the other end, there was a stunned pause and then a sharp intake of breath. When she spoke, her voice had changed, trembling, tight. I'm sorry, what did you just say? I rubbed my forehead, feeling a headache threatening. I know it's a horrible thing to hear. I hope I'm wrong, but I have reason to think that Mark and Emily have been seeing each other behind our backs. My voice faltered a little. It was the first time I'd spoken the suspicion out loud, and it made it all the more real. Her reaction came in pieces. At first, a brittle laugh of disbelief. Is this some kind of joke? Because if it is, it's not funny. There was anger rising in her voice, understandably. I wish it were a joke, I said quietly. I'm deadly serious. I wouldn't have bothered you if I didn't think it was likely true. Look, I know this is a lot to dump on you. I'm sorry. She was silent for a moment except for a shaky breath. Then, in a smaller voice, she asked, why do you think Mark and your wife are having an affair? I heard the pain she struggled to contain in that question, and it made my eyes sting unexpectedly. This woman might be about to have her life turned upside down just like me. I chose my words carefully. Last night, my wife said something. We were at home together, and she accidentally said Mark's name in an intimate moment. I cringed internally at having to reveal that detail, but I needed her to grasp the gravity. Oh my God, Rachel breathed, a mix of horror and sorrow in her tone. I imagined she might be covering her mouth with her hand. I knew I had when it happened. She tried to brush it off, but it didn't sit right with me, I continued. I confronted her, but she denied everything. Still, my gut tells me something's been going on. And when I put together a few other things, her being distant lately, a couple of odd lies, I'm almost certain. Rachel's voice turned urgent. What lies? What have you noticed? I told her as succinctly as I could about Emily's recent behaviors, the increased guardedness, late nights, the so-called girls' trip that didn't quite add up. As I listed them, it struck me how I had rationalized each one until now. When I finished, Rachel was quiet for a long few seconds. Then she spoke, low and trembling. I've noticed things too, with Mark. My heart caught. As much as I didn't want this to be true, hearing her say that was a validation. You have? She sniffed, and I realized she might be crying softly. But her voice was steady enough. He's been coming home late a lot the last couple months. Always some excuse, work ran over, or had to meet a client. And he's been protective of his phone, too. He never used to mind if I picked it up to, check the weather or something. Now it's glued to him. Last week, I saw a text notification light up when he was showering. It was face down, so I only caught a glimpse, but I thought I saw the name M before it disappeared. I asked him if he'd gotten a message, and he just said it was a spam email alert. She gave a bitter, shaky laugh. I didn't push it, but I had a bad feeling. M. Emily often went by M with close friends. My stomach turned. This was confirmation in my mind. More than confirmation, it was like a punch to the gut. I clenched my jaw until the wave of anger passed. I'm sorry, I said softly. I know how it feels, that bad feeling. It's why I reached out to you. I thought maybe you might have seen signs too. Or at least if you hadn't, you deserve to know what I suspect. Rachel took a moment, and when she spoke again, there was resolve in her voice beneath the hurt. Thank you for telling me. God, I can't believe this. Actually, part of me can. I've had this knot in my stomach for weeks that I kept trying to ignore. Women's intuition, I guess. And I just never, ever imagined. She trailed off, and I could imagine her shaking her head in dismay. I know, I commiserated. It's the last thing I expected, too. We both fell silent, the reality of it sinking in. It was oddly comforting to share that silence with someone who understood the shock. I could hear her breathing, a bit ragged, as if trying not to cry too much. Finally, I broke the quiet. Rachel, I don't want to be right about this. But if I am, we both need to decide what to do. Yeah, she whispered. Then after a hard sniff, she continued more firmly. Yeah, we do. Have you confronted your wife again or done anything else? Not yet, I answered. I only really put the pieces together last night. I thought about, I don't know, trying to catch them somehow. But I don't have a clue when or where they meet, and I promised myself I wouldn't do anything rash. She seemed to think about that. Mark hasn't admitted anything to me. If I confront him without proof, he'll just lie. He's good at that, she added with a note of bitterness that suggested this might not be the first serious issue in their marriage, or at least she knew his slippery ways. Same with Emily, I said. She'll deny until the end of time unless I have concrete evidence. Rachel exhaled slowly, then said, We should meet, in person. I think we need to talk this out face to face and figure out a plan. Hearing that gave me a strange sense of relief that I wasn't alone in this, that someone else was proactively with me. I'd like that, I agreed. Maybe today, if you're available. I can leave work early or meet up whenever. She checked herself. I I have work too, but honestly, I can't imagine concentrating on anything now. Let me see if I can take a personal afternoon. She paused. Would later today work for you? Around 5, there's a coffee shop at Union Station. That might be halfway if you're downtown. I can get there by train from my office. I knew the place. That works. I'll be there at 5. Okay? She sounded a mix of nervous and determined. And David, thank you for reaching out. I hate this is happening, but I'd rather know than be in the dark. Me too, I said softly. Despite the circumstances, there was sincerity and warmth in her tone that I appreciated. I'll see you in a few hours. We hung up, and I set my phone down, staring at it for a long moment. My hands were shaking slightly with adrenaline. It felt like crossing a point of no return. I had just allied myself with another betrayed spouse to uncover the truth. There was a certain gravity to that. Whatever we found or did next would change all of our lives. But one thing was sure. I wasn't going to just stew in uncertainty and pain. I was doing something about it, rationally and carefully. A spark of resolve kindled inside me, cutting through the helplessness. If Emily and Mark thought they could make fools of us, they were about to learn they'd gravely underestimated their spouses. I glanced at the clock. It was only mid-morning. The hours until 5 p.m. would crawl by, but at least I had a mission now. I took a deep breath and turned back to my computer screen. For the first time in weeks, I felt strangely clear-headed. Hurt, yes, angry, absolutely, but also focused. If there was one thing I excelled at, it was making a plan when faced with a problem. And right now, that plan was forming. Step by step, I would gather evidence, confirm the affair without alerting the cheaters, and then would come consequences for both of them. A cold determination settled in me as I finally dove into my work to kill time. By the end of this ordeal, they would regret ever betraying us. That much I swore to myself. Part 3. Laying the Trap. The rest of the day passed in agonizing slow motion. I forced myself through a few more tasks at work, but mostly I was counting down the hours until 5 at audio. My mind kept racing ahead, imagining all the ways our meeting might go, what we might plan, and what I would do if our suspicions were confirmed beyond doubt. By 4:30, I couldn't wait any longer. I left the office early, citing a personal emergency to my boss. He gave me a concerned look. I rarely left work unfinished, but I brushed it off with a promise to make up the time later. I arrived at the coffee shop a good 15 minutes early, my nerves jangling. It was a busy spot near Union Station, filled with commuters grabbing a drink before their train rides home. I claimed a small table in the corner away from the bustle and ordered 2 coffees, figuring Rachel might want one, and it gave my hands something to do. At precisely 5 p.m., I saw her step inside. Even though I'd only met her that one time, I recognized her instantly. Medium height, slim, with wavy auburn hair that fell to her shoulders. She looked around anxiously until I caught her eye and gave a small wave. Today her face was drawn and pale, eyes puffy as if she'd been crying recently. I felt a sympathetic twist in my chest. She offered a tentative smile and made her way to the table. "Hi, Rachel," I greeted as she reached me, standing up. "Yes, David," she asked softly. Her green eyes searched my face, likely seeing the same strain she wore. "That's me," I confirmed. For a brief, awkward second, we hesitated. Then I extended a hand. Shaking hands felt oddly formal given the circumstances, but it was better than an overfamiliar gesture. Her grip was cool and a bit shaky. "I got you a coffee. Hope that's okay," I said, sliding the extra cup toward her. "I wasn't sure how you'd take it. I left it black, but there's cream and sugar here." She managed a grateful nod. "Black is fine, thanks. I could use the caffeine." We both sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke, as the reality of why we were here settled between us. Up close, I could see the tension in her posture, the slight tremor in her hands as she cupped them around the warm coffee cup. I'm sure she could see my clenched jaw and tired eyes. "I can't believe we're having this conversation," she said quietly, finally breaking the silence. I let out a dry chuckle devoid of humor. Me neither. But I'm glad you came. I really didn't want to do this alone. She blew out a breath. Honestly, the moment you hung up, I knew I had to. I could barely function at work after that call. I kept wanting to just run out and scream at Mark, but I knew that wouldn't do any good without proof. She swallowed hard, pain flickering across her face. Part of me still hoped maybe it was a misunderstanding. But deep down, I think I knew. I just didn't have the proof or anyone to confirm my fears until you. My heart went out to her. I'm sorry, I said. It felt inadequate, but I didn't know what else to say. I wish I didn't have to break it to you like that. She shook her head. No, I'm grateful. I mean, it's horrible, but I'm grateful to know. To not be the oblivious fool if everyone else somehow knew. I, I'd rather face reality. Her eyes glistened with held-back tears, but she firmed her mouth in determination. What about you? How are you holding up? It was surprising to be asked that by someone who was essentially a stranger, yet bound to me now by this shared betrayal. I'm not sure, I admitted, kind of swinging between anger and feeling like I'm going to fall apart, to be honest. But having a plan helps. Focus on the practical stuff, you know? She nodded. Same. I cried a lot after we spoke, but then I got angry. I've never been so angry in my life. Her voice hardened slightly. If they're doing this to us, they have to face the consequences. I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. Which is why we need to catch them definitively. We spent the next several minutes comparing notes more thoroughly. I told her everything about the slip of the tongue last night in more detail than on the phone, and Emily's evasiveness. Rachel revealed more of what she'd noticed. Mark had been strangely protective of his laptop lately too, closing it whenever she walked by. And twice in the past month, he'd gone into work on a Saturday for urgent projects, which was unusual for his position. In hindsight, she suspected those Saturdays might have been rendezvous times with Emily. I felt a fresh stab of pain hearing that. On those Saturdays, Emily had told me she was just running errands or meeting a friend. It all fit. The more we talked, the clearer it became that Emily and Mark likely had been carrying on for at least a few months, if not longer, under our noses. The realization made me sick and furious in equal measure. So, I said, after a stretch of tense conversation, the question is, how do we confirm it beyond a doubt? How do we catch them? Rachel took a deep sip of her coffee as if bracing herself. I've been thinking about that. We could try to follow them or something, but they'd be on guard if they suspected anything. And I don't really want to hire a private investigator or anything like that. Me neither, I interjected. I had considered it briefly in the afternoon, then dismissed it. It felt too impersonal, and I didn't want outsiders to witness the ugliest moment of my life if I could help it. Besides, something in me wanted to be the one to catch them, to look them in the eyes as their little secret world collapsed. What if we set a trap, she said, lowering her voice even though the surrounding tables were noisy enough to cover us. Create an opportunity that's too tempting for them to resist and then be there when they take the bait. I nodded slowly. That had been percolating in my mind, too. That makes sense. They seem to be careful normally. But if they think we're both out of the picture, maybe they'll drop their guard. Rachel managed a thin smile. Exactly what I was thinking. For example, if you were going to be out of town and I was also away, odds are they'd try to meet up, right? Right. I felt a grim sort of appreciation for her cunning. We'd have to coordinate it. Same time frame so they each know their spouse is gone. She tapped her finger on the table thoughtfully. Do you travel often for work? Rarely, I said. But it wouldn't be unheard of. I could invent something. Maybe a weekend training seminar or a client meeting in another city. And conveniently, it could be, say, this coming weekend. It was already Wednesday. Short notice, but corporate demands pop up unexpectedly all the time. Rachel was already nodding. This weekend I could plausibly go somewhere too. My sister just had a baby and lives out in Ohio. I could say I'm going to help her for a few days. I've been meaning to visit anyway. That's perfect, I agreed. Congrats to your sister, by the way. Thanks, she smiled briefly. Then the smile faded. If I tell Mark I'm leaving Friday morning to drive down, that leaves the whole weekend for him to think he's free. I could tell Emily I have to fly to New York for a finance convention or something, leaving Friday as well and back Sunday. We both paused, letting the plan take shape. It felt slightly surreal, plotting something almost theatrical like this, but it also felt empowering. Instead of being two clueless spouses, we were turning the tables, if only a little. Okay, she said. So we set the stage. What about the actual confrontation? We'd need to know where they decide to meet. I drummed my fingers anxiously. That part might be tricky. Do you think Mark would bring her to your house? Or would they go to mine? Or somewhere else, like a hotel? Rachel bit her lip. If he knows I'm out of town, I suspect he'd take her to our house. It's safer than a hotel or risking your place where neighbors might recognize her or something. Plus, our house is pretty private. No nosy neighbors close by, and we have that long driveway. I remembered that from when we visited their home after the holiday party. They had a larger property in a quieter suburb north of the city, whereas our place was a smaller house in a more tightly packed neighborhood. If I were Mark, I'd choose his house, especially since no one would question him being there. I think you're right, I said. Your house is the likely spot. I doubt they'd try mine unless absolutely necessary because Emily might worry I could come home unexpectedly. If you're away, Mark having someone over wouldn't immediately raise suspicions from anyone. Rachel's jaw tightened. It makes me sick to think of them in my home, but if that's where we catch them, so be it. A flash of empathy went through me. I could imagine how violating that would feel for her. It's one thing for me to think of Emily with someone else, horrible on its own, but in our home, or her and Rachel's home, it adds another level of disrespect. We'll catch them in the act, I said firmly, and they'll regret it, I promise you. She nodded, appreciating the solidarity. We should plan the logistics carefully. If I tell him I'm leaving early Friday, I actually will leave. At least I'll pack up and drive off so he sees me go. I can circle back later and stay with a friend or even at a motel for the day. Then, when he invites her over, we make our move. Right. How do we know when she arrives, though? We can't exactly stand watch in front of your house, too, obviously. Rachel considered. There's some woods across the street from us. We could park a car a little ways off and keep watch from there, unseen. I nodded. That could work. Worst case, one of us can slip onto the property on foot and peek in windows, but that has its own risks. I suddenly recalled something. Rachel, do you have a spare key to your house hidden somewhere outside? Or does Mark know if you would? She raised her brow, then gave a little laugh. Yeah, actually, there's one inside a fake rock by the back porch. Mark doesn't know about it. I put it there for emergencies after he once forgot his keys and got locked out. I never told him because I wanted a backup in case he wasn't home and I got locked out. You think we might need it? It could be useful if the doors are locked when we arrive. We might need to slip in quietly and catch them by surprise instead of banging on the door and alerting them. She grimaced at the mental image but nodded. True. I don't want to give them any heads up. I want to see their faces when they realize we know. I couldn't agree more. Imagining that moment brought me a grim satisfaction. All right, so Friday, I summarized. You leave in the morning. I leave maybe midday or afternoon for my flight. We assume Friday night or Saturday they'll meet, likely at your place. How do we coordinate our approach? Maybe as soon as I see any sign that they're heading to the house, I alert you, she said. Or vice versa, if you catch wind from your side. But likely Mark will reach out to Emily once he thinks I'm gone. I doubt he'll waste time. I clenched my teeth at that, but it was probably true. Yeah, Emily might act normal until she knows I'm definitely out of town. Maybe she'll even mention to me tonight or tomorrow something about her plans for the weekend. I'll keep an ear out. Rachel fidgeted with a sugar packet on the table. We should have a way to communicate quickly. Maybe a text code if we can't talk. Like, if I text you, hey, I forgot something at home, that could mean they're at the house now. I smiled a little at her proactiveness. Works for me. And if I see any signs on my end, I'll call or text you something innocuous as well. We exchanged phone numbers directly, though we'd obviously spoken earlier, just to be sure we had all methods to reach each other. It felt odd saving her contact as just Rachel in my phone, knowing she was technically the wife of my wife's lover, but now also my co-conspirator. We talked details a bit longer, discussing where to park. We agreed on a small service lane that ran behind her property line, which was usually empty. From there, a short walk through some trees could get us to her backyard unseen. She described her house layout for me, since I'd only been there that once and never beyond the living room. The master bedroom was upstairs at the end of the hall. If they were together, it would likely be there or possibly the downstairs den. Either way, we'd need to peek in windows or slip in quietly to find them. As we hashed out these plans, I was struck by the absurdity and gravity of it. Here we were calmly arranging an ambush to catch our spouses committing adultery. It felt like plotting a sting operation. A dismal little part of me almost found it darkly comedic in its twistedness. But mostly I felt cold, righteous resolve. They had driven us to this. Eventually, with most plans settled, our conversation slowed. We sat back and I realized we'd both barely touched the coffees. Mine was cold by now. I couldn't tell if the churning in my gut was anxiety, anger, or anticipation. Probably all three. Rachel broke the silence softly. I keep wondering, why? I mean, what were they thinking? Her voice cracked on the last word. Were we not enough or did we do something wrong? I've been going over everything in my head, every fight, every time I stayed late at work or wasn't in the mood. It's like I don't know what could have made him do this. I felt a pang of sympathy and understood too well. I'd been avoiding that particular emotional rabbit hole, but it was lurking. Questions of inadequacy, self-blame. I looked at her earnestly. I don't know why they did it, but I do know it's not your fault. Or mine. People who cheat like this, they choose to do it. No one forces them. They could have talked to us, tried to fix things, or just left, rather than sneak around. This is on them. She gave a weak smile. You're right. Logically, I know that. Emotionally, it's harder. But hearing you say it helps. I realized it helped me, too, to say it out loud. Emily's betrayal was her choice. Not because I failed as a husband. I had to hold on to that truth to keep my dignity intact. After we catch them, I said slowly, there's going to be a lot to deal with. Divorce, probably. I don't know if you've thought that far ahead. Rachel inhaled and straightened her shoulders. I have. There's no coming back from this for me. If he's doing what we think, I'm done. I mean, I'll confirm it first, hear whatever pathetic explanation he has, but I'll never trust him again. Her eyes hardened with resolve through the tears. I'll be filing for divorce immediately. I nodded. That was pretty much where I was leaning, too. Same here. I don't see any way I could ever look at Emily and not remember all of this. And I wouldn't want to stay married to someone who could do this to me. She placed her hand on the table, close to mine, not touching but in a gesture of mutual support. We'll get through it, she said softly. It's going to be awful, but we'll get through. Yeah, I replied, managing a faint smile. One step at a time. First step, get the evidence. We wrapped up our meeting with renewed determination. Outside the coffee shop, the evening rush had begun. People streamed in and out of the station, everyone absorbed in their own world. It struck me how life goes on so normally for others while ours was imploding. We exchanged a quick, wordless hug before parting. Just a brief embrace of solidarity between two people who had started the day as strangers and ended it as allies in misfortune. Good luck, she whispered. You too, I said. I'll be in touch Friday. As I walked away, I realized that for the first time since this ordeal began, I didn't feel completely alone. It was a small comfort amid the turmoil. Friday, setting the stage. The next 2 days were a blur of careful deception and simmering anticipation. Wednesday night, I told Emily the fabricated news. My firm was sending me to a weekend conference in New York on short notice. As I delivered the lie, my heart was pounding, half expecting her to see through it or react strangely, but she didn't suspect a thing. Why would she? Instead, she looked at me from across the dinner table with a mixture of surprise and, if I wasn't imagining it, a flicker of excitement in her eyes. This weekend, she asked. That's so sudden. Tell me about it, I said, rolling my eyes for effect. Charlie was supposed to go, but his wife got sick, so now I have to fill in. I fly out Friday afternoon, back Sunday night. Emily tried to hide it, but I swore I saw the corners of her mouth twitch upward for a split second. Still, she did the dutiful wife thing, sighed, and said, "Ah, that's a bummer. I was hoping we could go to that farmer's market Saturday." I shrugged. Sorry, I know. I was looking forward to it too. We can go next week, maybe. Inside, bitterness churned at how easy this was for me to lie and for her to accept it. We were both playing roles now. She reached over and squeezed my hand. It's okay, not your fault. Maybe I'll just have a lazy weekend then. Her thumb brushed idly against my wedding ring as she said that, and I wondered if she felt any guilt at all, touching that symbol of our marriage while plotting to break it. If she was indeed plotting, some naive part of me still hoped maybe nothing would happen, that perhaps she'd spend the weekend truly alone and I'd be left with nothing to catch. But I doubted it. To her credit, Emily maintained her usual behavior well. If anything, she was a touch more attentive than she had been the past few weeks, asking if I needed any shirts ironed for the trip, offering to pack me a snack for the flight. Perhaps she wanted to avoid any suspicion on my part, or perhaps she was relieved the pressure was off her for a couple days and that made her lighter. Either way, I reciprocated with equal normalcy, giving her a kiss goodnight and acting like all was okay. The bile in my throat at the deceit was mitigated only by the knowledge that I was deceiving her too now, for a righteous cause. On Thursday, I discreetly prepared. I told my real boss I had a personal family matter over the weekend and might be slow to respond to emails. That covered me if needed. I booked a refundable plane ticket to New York, just in case Emily got curious about details. She didn't ask for specifics, but better safe. I even threw a few things in a carry-on bag to make it look convincing, and left the itinerary printout on our dresser. Bait I doubted she'd actually go inspect, but it was there. Meanwhile, I texted with Rachel using an innocuous pretext. We saved each other under pseudonyms. She was Ray S. in my phone now if Emily happened to see a notification. Our messages were bland on the surface, discussing an imaginary work project, but the real content was coded. By Thursday night, she confirmed her end was set. Project meeting moved to Ohio office till Monday, leaving in morning. That meant she'd told Mark she was leaving town Friday. Friday morning arrived at last. I headed into work briefly to keep up appearances and tie a few things off, knowing I'd be too wrapped up in the sting operation later to focus on anything else. Around 10 a.m., I got a text from Ray S. "Forgot folder at home, we'll grab on way." That was our agreed signal that she had left and then doubled back. Essentially, Mark watched her depart as planned. She told me in a follow-up, securely via a messaging app we'd both downloaded for privacy, that she'd driven off with her car loaded as if going to Ohio, and he had waved goodbye from the door. She then swung around to a nearby grocery store parking lot, where a friend picked her up. Her car would remain as a prop in a long-term parking at the airport. Another clever touch to ensure if Mark decided to snoop or track her phone, it would ping near the airport and her car would be seen there. Rachel had thought of everything. Now she was safely tucked away at a friend's apartment about 20 miles from her house, waiting for Mark to take the bait. My turn was next. I went home around noon under the pretense of picking up my suitcase and heading to the airport. Emily was working from home that day, she often did on Fridays. She greeted me from her laptop at the dining table, and I noticed she had actually gotten a bit dressed up. Nothing obvious, but she'd put on a nicer blouse and some makeup. Normally, if she was just bumming around during my absence, she'd stay in yoga pants and a ponytail. The observation sent a surge of anger through me. Was she already dressing up because she expected to see him once I left? I shook off the dark thought and forced a smile. "All packed," I announced, wheeling my small suitcase toward the door. She got up and followed me to the entryway. "Got your phone charger? Toothbrush?" she asked, almost like a caring spouse. The act was Oscar-worthy. "Yep," I patted the carry-on. "Got everything. The flight's in a couple hours, so I should head out." "Okay," she said softly. "Have a safe trip." She opened her arms and gave me a hug. I hugged back, feeling how stiff I was. She felt different in my arms, or maybe it was just my perception, knowing what I knew. It took all my willpower not to say something scathing or desperate in that moment, but I held it in. When we pulled apart, she gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. "I love you," she said. I stared at her for a second. "What do you know about love?" I wanted to snap, but I didn't. I just responded, "Love you too," which tasted like ash in my mouth. Then I walked out, leaving her in the doorway waving, a perfect picture of a loving wife seeing off her husband. The moment I turned the corner out of her line of sight, my face fell into a scowl. I drove around aimlessly for a bit, parking one street over where I could see our house. I hadn't planned to linger so close. I intended to rendezvous with Rachel on the other side of town, but curiosity got the better of me. I watched from a discreet distance. Sure enough, not 20 minutes after my departure, I saw Emily emerge from the house dressed in a nicer outfit, jeans, boots, the blouse, her hair freshly brushed. She got into her car and drove off. My jaw tightened. It was early afternoon. Was she going to meet him now? It would make sense. They probably couldn't wait to be together openly once both spouses were gone. Maybe a celebratory little date or something before heading to the love nest for the weekend. I resisted the impulse to follow her. That wasn't the plan, and I might spook them if I got too close. Instead, I texted Rachel, "Leaving for airport now." That was code that Emily was on the move. She replied a few minutes later, "Good luck, stay safe." Not really code, just genuine sentiment. I appreciated it. I then drove off to put enough distance between me and my neighborhood. I ended up at a shopping mall parking lot a few miles away, where I planned to loiter for a while until I heard from Rachel that the trap was ready to spring. It was a strange feeling, sitting in my car on a sunny Friday afternoon, knowing that my wife was likely off with her lover at that very moment. I felt adrenaline coursing, and a detached part of me marveled at how calm I outwardly was, despite my racing heart. The plan was in motion, and I was determined to see it through. Around 5 p.m., as I was absent-mindedly flipping through radio stations and gnawing on a cold pretzel from the mall, my phone buzzed with a secure message from Rachel. His car just pulled into our driveway. Only his. My pulse quickened. If Mark was arriving at his house solo, it likely meant he was preparing the scene. Perhaps Emily would meet him there separately. I texted back, "Keep me posted." 5 minutes later, Emily's car just arrived. They're both inside now. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. This was it. They'd taken the bait, the mice were in the trap. Now it was time for us cats to pounce. "On my way," I replied. We had already coordinated to meet near the service lane behind her house. It would take me maybe 20 minutes to get there. I started the car, heart thumping so hard it almost hurt. This was really happening. In a short time, I'd finally have the truth in hand, undeniable and ugly as it might be. And God help them when I did. Part 4. The Reckoning. I pulled onto the narrow service lane behind the Ellisons' property just as dusk began to settle. The trees cast long shadows, and the air was cool and still. Parking behind a clump of overgrown bushes, I killed the engine and stepped out as quietly as possible. Within seconds, Rachel emerged from the woods where she'd been waiting, her face taut with tension. "They're in there," she whispered, coming up beside me. In her hand, I noticed, was her phone. Camera already rolling. I gave her a questioning look. She nodded grimly. "Evidence," she murmured. "Just in case." Smart. I pulled out my own phone and discreetly started recording audio, slipping it into my jacket pocket with the mic facing out. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure even the mic would pick it up. Together, we crept along the tree line to the back of the house. The property was dim, lit only by a couple of lights glowing in downstairs windows and an upstairs one, likely the bedroom. Rachel guided me to a point where we could see in through a gap in the curtains of the ground floor den. What I saw made my blood boil. There on the couch sat Emily and Mark entangled in each other. They were still partially clothed, thank God for small mercies, but it was unmistakably intimate. Emily was perched on his lap, her arms around his neck, blouse unbuttoned revealing her bra. Mark's shirt was off entirely, and his hands— I had to look away for a second, a red haze of rage blurring my vision. Next to me, I heard Rachel suck in a sharp breath, her hand clenching my arm. It took every ounce of self-control not to burst through the glass right then, but we stuck to the plan. Catch them off guard, if possible, literally with their pants down, and confront them with no escape. I leaned to Rachel's ear. "Key?" I breathed. She pointed to the porch. An exterior light from the neighbor's yard gave just enough illumination. I spotted the fake rock by the steps that she'd described. Carefully, I tiptoed to it and retrieved the spare key hidden underneath. The faint click of the rock moving must have been masked by the rustle of leaves, because neither of the cheating pair stirred inside. Rachel joined me at the back door. The curtains on it were drawn, but muffled sounds came through, breathy laughter and low murmurs. I saw her jaw tighten. She reached out and gently tested the handle. Locked. Nodding to me, she inserted the key and turned it as silently as possible. The bolt clicked open. My pulse surged. This was it. Together we eased the door open. I let Rachel lead since it was her house and she knew the layout. We stepped into the kitchen, which opened onto the den where they were. A kitchen island partially blocked their view of us. I could now clearly hear Emily's voice, a tone she used to use with me long ago, playful, sultry. It made me sick. Can't believe we finally have a whole weekend, she was purring. Mark chuckled. Told you we'd get a chance eventually. Fate's on our side, babe. Babe. I felt Rachel grip my hand briefly as if to steady herself at hearing her husband call another woman by that endearment. They still hadn't noticed us. Peering around the island, I saw Mark shift, gently laying Emily down on the couch beneath him. She giggled softly. They were starting to tug at each other's remaining clothes. I exchanged a look with Rachel. Her eyes were blazing now with fury and pain. She gave me a single nod. We stepped out from behind the island and advanced into the doorway of the den. Well, well, I said, my voice dripping with venom. Hope we're not interrupting anything. Chaos ensued. Emily's head snapped toward us first. I will never forget the look in her eyes. Utter shock, morphing to horror. She yelped, scrambling upright and pulling her open blouse closed frantically. Mark, caught off guard, nearly fell off the couch in his haste to get up. He grabbed a throw blanket to cover his bare chest on reflex, his face blanching, as if he'd seen ghosts. David? Emily's voice was high-pitched, trembling. What? How? She couldn't even form a sentence. She looked from me to Rachel and back, comprehension slowly dawning that we were there together. Mark found his voice next, though it cracked. Rachel, what the hell? He stepped forward, but the intensity in Rachel's glare stopped him cold. Surprised to see me, honey. Rachel spat out the endearment like a curse. I'd never seen her this furious. She was practically vibrating with it. I crossed my arms, positioning myself beside Rachel as we faced them down. Not the weekend getaway you two were imagining, is it? Emily slid off the couch, still clutching the front of her blouse. Her hair was disheveled, cheeks flushed, whether from arousal or humiliation now I couldn't tell. David, I can explain, she stammered, tears already pooling in her eyes. I raised a hand sharply. Stop, just stop. I don't want to hear a single lie from you right now. Beside her, Mark looked to Rachel, attempting a placating expression that came off as a grimace. Rachel, listen, it's not what it looks like. Rachel let out a bark of disbelief. And not what it looks like? Really? She swung her phone up, the camera still recording. Because it looks like you were all over this tramp on my couch. Her voice cracked on the word my, tears of rage in her eyes. Emily flinched at the insult, looking as if she might collapse. She pressed herself back against the arm of the couch, covering her chest with one arm and wiping her tear-streaked face with the other. I stepped forward, anger welling. Tramp is too kind, I snarled. I'd say liar, cheater, take your pick. Emily winced, fresh tears spilling. I'm so sorry, she wept, voice barely audible. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions at seeing her cry. Once, I'd have moved mountains to avoid those tears. Now, they just left me cold. Sorry, now you're sorry. I found myself stepping forward. Were you sorry when you were moaning his name last night in our living room, Emily? Was that the sound of remorse? She dropped her hand from her face, eyes wide at my revelation. You heard that? Of course she realized now that that was how this started. That's right, I said, jaw clenched. That one word out of your mouth was all it took. From that moment, whatever this is, I gestured between her and Mark, was doomed. You blew up our life with that slip, and thank God you did, because otherwise, I'd still be living in the dark while you screwed around behind my back. Emily shook her head violently, stepping toward me. I never meant to hurt you. David, please. You have to believe me. I laughed harshly. Believe you? Are you insane? You've done nothing but lie to me for months, apparently. All those nights you claimed to be working late or out with friends. Jesus, I was such an idiot. I ran a hand through my hair, pacing a short, angry line. Then I whirled on Mark. And you... I guess I should thank you for not being my best friend or brother or something cliche. But you still screwed over your wife, who, by the way, is the only reason we caught you at all. She saw the signs, just like I did. Mark looked at me with a mix of fear and anger now. You set us up, he said, realization dawning. I nodded slowly, a grim satisfaction in confirming it. Damn right we did. You think it was coincidence both your spouses left town the same weekend? We orchestrated the whole thing, Mark. We played you, and you walked right into it. His face flushed red, humiliation turning to defensiveness. You had no right? That set me off. No right? I have every right to catch my wife cheating, you piece of garbage. I stepped closer, fists clenched. He instinctively backed up, bumping into the coffee table. "David, please," Emily cried, trying to put herself between me and Mark. "Don't—" I cut her off, my voice low and seething as I addressed them both. "Do you even understand what you've done? You destroyed 2 marriages. For what? Some cheap thrills? Because you couldn't communicate like adults? Or were we—" I motioned between me and Rachel. "Just not good enough for you?" Emily's lips trembled. "It wasn't like that. I—" She faltered, glancing to Mark for help, maybe expecting him to profess love or some grand reason that would justify the affair. But Mark, coward that he was, latched onto a different narrative: damage control. He turned to Rachel, hands clasped. "Rachel, I was stupid. She meant nothing to me. It was just sex, I swear. I never stopped loving you." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Emily's face flinch and hurt at those words. Good, let her feel a fraction of the betrayal. Rachel barked a sarcastic laugh through her tears. "Just sex? Well, that makes it all better, doesn't it?" Her voice wavered. "You think I care if you claim you love me the whole time? Love doesn't do this, Mark. Love respects, it communicates, it stays faithful. Or it ends things before starting something new. You don't get to have us both," Mark's eyes pleaded. "I know, I was wrong. I was selfish and stupid. But I can fix this. We can fix this." "Fix?" Rachel echoed incredulously. "Oh, there's no fixing this. I'm done, Mark. We're done. You threw away 7 years of marriage for her." She pointed at Emily, practically shaking with fury. "And you don't even have the spine to stand by it now that you're caught. Pathetic." Mark's expression twisted, a flash of anger in his eyes at that. "Don't say that," he began, stepping forward. "Or what?" Rachel challenged, stepping right up to him despite him being a head taller. "What are you going to do? You're in no position to make demands or threats, Mark." I moved closer in case he tried anything. He caught the movement and thought better of whatever macho impulse had flared. Instead, he looked down, ashamed or frustrated or both. Emily was sobbing freely now, shoulders quaking. She reached out toward me. "David, please. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I was going to end it, I swear. I was just weak and—" "Stop!" I held my palm up again. "Don't you dare say you love me. You lost that, right? And I don't need your excuses or your crocodile tears." My voice cracked slightly despite my resolve, emotion welling. I had to swallow and steady myself. "Emily, I gave you everything. All my love, trust, support. If something was missing for you, you could have talked to me. We could have worked on it or parted ways cleanly if it came to that. But instead you betrayed me in the cruelest way." I could see my words hitting her like blows. She cringed with each sentence. "So no, I don't want to hear I was weak or it just happened. You made deliberate choices. Both of you did." My eyes stung, but I refused to cry in front of them. I channeled the hurt into cold action. "Here's what's going to happen now. I'm contacting a divorce lawyer first thing Monday." Emily's knees nearly buckled at that, a wail escaping her lips. "No, please, oh," she cried, reaching out as if to touch me. I sidestepped. "Don't touch me." The disgust in my voice made her flinch as if slapped. "It's over, Emily. You killed our marriage the moment you decided to spread your legs for him." It was a cruel thing to say, but in that moment I wanted to hurt her, stab back for all the pain she'd inflicted. She stared at me, stricken, like she couldn't believe the man she knew would ever speak to her that way. Well, the man she knew was gone, forged into someone harder by her actions. I continued, relentless. "I'll also be filing on grounds of adultery. I've got evidence now." I tapped my pocket where my phone recorded and nodded toward Rachel's phone still aimed at them. "And trust me, I'll make sure you get as little as possible from me. You can go shack up with Mark if you want, but you're not getting a damn penny beyond what the law forces me to give." Emily was shaking her head, mouthing "no, no, no," like a mantra, tears streaming. I had more to say. "Your family is going to hear about this. I'll be sure to tell your mother why her daughter's marriage fell apart. Our friends? They'll know too. Hell, maybe we'll put it on Facebook and tag you both. Look who we caught screwing around." "David, stop," she sobbed, as if the embarrassment was the main issue. I felt a dark satisfaction seeing her squirm. "You should have thought of the consequences before, Emily. Actions have consequences. That's a lesson you apparently forgot." Rachel stepped forward now, addressing both of them with a scathing tone. "And just so you know, Mark, I've already taken the liberty of calling my attorney. There will be no reconciliation. I'll be filing for divorce immediately. I'll also be telling your family exactly why. I doubt your parents will be proud of their son now. Mark looked absolutely miserable, opening and closing his mouth. Rach, please. Can we at least talk about this privately? Please? His voice cracked. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Rachel's face contorted between pain and anger. Should have thought of that before you hopped into bed with someone else, Mark. I may have to deal with you during the divorce proceedings, but otherwise, I have nothing to say to you. You blew up our life. There's no coming back. He reached for her then, perhaps reflexively, maybe to beg, but she recoiled. Don't touch me, she said, echoing my words. And then, in a final act of defiance, she raised her phone again. Smile for the camera, you cheating bastards. She snapped a couple of quick photos of their stricken, half-dressed forms. Both Emily and Mark shielded their faces too late. For the record, Rachel said with icy calm, I'll only send these to people who matter, like the HR department at your company, Mark. Pretty sure they frown on senior managers sleeping with subordinates, so you might want to start polishing your resume. Mark's eyes went wide with panic. Rachel, no, don't do that. It'll ruin me at work. He moved as if to grab the phone, fury and desperation fueling him. Rachel stumbled back and instantly I stepped between them, shoving him hard in the chest. Off balance, he crashed against the couch. That's enough, I snarled, standing over him as he scrambled upright again. Something in me snapped. I welcomed the idea of him trying to fight. I had a lot of rage needing an outlet. By all means, give me an excuse, Mark. I'd love to knock your teeth in, please. He glared at me, breathing hard. For a second, I thought he might swing, but then Emily tugged at his arm, shaking her head urgently. Even now, she was trying to protect him? The thought disgusted me. Mark deflated, looking away. Just leave, he muttered, bitterness now creeping into his tone. You've said what you needed to. I huffed a humorless laugh. Oh, now you want us gone? Too bad. This is my wife here, Mark, and that's her house. I pointed to Rachel. We'll leave when we're damn well ready. In fact, Rachel, do you have anything else to add? Rachel stepped up beside me, fixing them with one last look of contempt. She drew a shaky breath. Nothing you haven't already heard. But let me make it crystal clear so there's no misunderstanding. We are done. Her voice broke slightly on that last word, but she pressed on. Don't call me. Don't try to apologize later when you think I've cooled down. I'm changing the locks, and you can expect divorce papers soon. I'll have my brother come by for your stuff, she turned to Emily, who looked utterly broken, huddled in the blanket she'd snatched to cover her disheveled clothing. And you? You deserve each other. Hope it was worth it. I doubt he'll stay faithful to you either, sweetie. The sarcasm dripped. Emily just closed her eyes, fresh tears coursing down. I decided I'd had enough. It was time to go before I truly lost it and did something we'd regret. Come on, Rachel. Let's get out of here. I started to guide Rachel toward the door, but paused for one final remark of my own. I looked back at my wife. No, the stranger who wore my wife's face. Emily, I'll have someone drop off your belongings next week. I don't want you in my house anymore. You can stay wherever. I waved vaguely, implying maybe Mark's, maybe hell for all I cared. She cried harder, covering her mouth, but nodded. Oh, okay, came the weak reply. She looked so pitiful in that moment. A part of me almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But I reminded myself that she made this bed. Literally. With that, I turned and didn't look back again. Rachel was already marching out of the kitchen, shoulders shaking. I followed, leaving the two adulterers in stunned silence. As we exited through the back door into the cool evening, I heard Emily break down in sobs and Mark utter a string of curses, slamming something, maybe the coffee table. The sounds of their little love affair collapsing behind us felt satisfying. It was an ugly, tragic satisfaction, but it was all I had. I locked the door with the spare key and dropped it on the porch. Let them figure out how to lock up with broken hearts and no keys. Outside, the sky had gone fully dark, a few stars peeking through. Rachel stood a few paces away, hugging herself. When I came up beside her, she let out a shuddering breath. I thought she might collapse, but she steadied. We looked at each other in the dim light from the house's window. Her eyes were red and full of tears, just like I'm sure mine were. It's done, I said quietly. an immense sense of finality washing over me. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. Yeah. And then, unexpectedly, we fell into each other's arms. A desperate, compassionate embrace between two people who had just gone through hell. I held her tightly, and she held me, and for a moment we just breathed and let a few strangled sobs out into the night. It wasn't romantic or anything. It was the hug of comrades in battle who survived the fight. After a minute, we parted slightly. Thank you, I murmured to her, meaning it for everything. Her strength, her partnership in this, everything. She gave a trembling smile. We did it. In the background, I heard the faint sound of raised voices from the house, Mark and Emily, perhaps arguing now that we were gone or blaming each other. I realized our work here was finished. The fallout was now in their hands while we moved on to pick up the pieces of our lives. Do you want to come with me? I asked gently. I'm not really keen to go back to an empty house right now. I could use a strong drink. Maybe we both could. Rachel sniffled and managed a tiny wry grin. I think we've earned it. Arm in arm, supporting each other, we walked back into the woods toward our cars, leaving the shattered remains of two relationships behind us. The reckoning had come and gone. Now there was nothing left to do but start again. Part 5, Aftermath. 6 months later, I sat on a park bench with a warm spring sun on my face, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The tumult of the last half year had finally settled. So much had changed in such a short time, yet in many ways I felt lighter, unburdened from a life that, as it turned out, was built on lies. My divorce from Emily was finalized 2 weeks ago. In the end, it went relatively smoothly. Perhaps out of guilt or sheer exhaustion, she didn't contest a thing. She moved out of our house the day after we caught them and went to stay with a friend. We split our modest assets with little fanfare. She kept her car and personal savings. I kept the house and my retirement fund. We sold off a few jointly bought pieces, but that was it. I think she was too ashamed to try to fight for more, especially knowing I had more than enough evidence of her adultery. Illinois might be no fault, but the court of public opinion in our lives certainly wasn't. And she knew it. True to my word, I made sure everyone important knew why we split. Her parents were devastated and furious with her, and even apologized to me. Many of our friends sided with me and cut ties with her. The social fallout was messy for her, I'm sure, though I tried not to revel in it too much. I heard through a grapevine that she quit her job soon after. Working in the same office as Mark would have been unbearable. Mark also faced fallout. He quietly resigned from the firm under a cloud of scandal. As for Mark and Emily's grand romance, well, it withered on the vine. Perhaps they thought being together openly after the dust settled would validate what they did. But I suspect reality was harsher. I learned from a mutual acquaintance that they tried dating publicly for a brief time, but it didn't last. Without the sneaking and secrecy, without the marriages to rebel against, whatever bond they'd formed just fell apart. Trust, after all, is a hard thing to build on a foundation of betrayal. I'm not surprised. If they could cheat with each other, they likely wondered if they'd cheat on each other too. In the end, they drifted separate ways. Last I heard, Emily was planning to move to a new city for a fresh start, and Mark was renting a small apartment alone, nursing his wounded pride. "Penny for your thoughts?" came a familiar voice beside me on the bench. I turned and smiled. Rachel sat down, handing me a to-go cup of coffee, just the way I liked it. She knew by now. We met often these days. "I was just thinking about the past," I replied, accepting the coffee. "And how nice it is that it is the past." She nodded, her auburn hair catching the sunlight. Agreed. She looked more radiant and relaxed now than she did 6 months ago. Her divorce was finalized last month. She left their old house full of bad memories and moved to a new apartment downtown. A fresh start with no ghosts. Rachel and I clinked our coffee cups lightly, a little toast to survival. Over the months, we've become each other's confidants, support systems, and perhaps more. What started as late-night phone calls to vent or check on each other gradually turned into dinners, then frequent hangouts, and an undeniable closeness. We haven't put a label on it, not wanting to rush anything, but there's a warmth and anticipation when I'm with her that I haven't felt in a long time. Healing together has a way of forging a deep bond. "It's strange, isn't it?" she said softly. This time last year, we were happily married to other people, blissfully unaware. Blissfully ignorant anyway, I corrected with a wry smile. I wouldn't call it bliss now. She chuckled. True. Then she placed her hand over mine on the bench. The gesture was gentle, but not uncertain. I'm glad we found something like a silver lining through it all. I turned my palm up under hers, threading our fingers. It felt natural. Me too, I said, and I meant it. In the darkest of times, we found each other's light. It was simply the truth. If you had told me 6 months ago that I'd be sitting here, heartache largely mended, holding hands with the woman who was once just the stranger wife of my wife's lover, I'd have called you crazy. But life has its wild twists. One unforgivable slip of the tongue had unraveled my old life, but it also led me here to a new chapter I never anticipated. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a pair of ducks splash in the park pond. I realized I felt content, maybe even happy. The scars were healing. Trust might take longer, but with Rachel I felt I could perhaps risk it again, slowly. She understood betrayal as I did, and neither of us would ever take love or honesty for granted again. Eventually, I squeezed her hand and stood. Come on, I said, let's go. We've got a whole future ahead of us to get to. She looked up at me, eyes bright. Lead the way, David. As we walked off together, leaving the past in the past, I felt hopeful. The road had been long and painful, but I survived with my dignity intact and my life ahead of me. In the end, the truth came out. Justice was served, and I lost what wasn't real to begin with. And maybe, just maybe, I gained something real and good in the aftermath. Sometimes one wrong word can destroy an entire world, but sometimes from the rubble you build a stronger one. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.